Alp Mehmet, Oxford University's Migration Observatory have said that there is currently no robust methodology to make accurate predictions about the numbers of Bulgarians and Romanian migrants who will enter the UK. So your estimate of 50,000 is just a wild guess.
Migration Observatory know full well that you have to make a judgment. Our judgment has been based on a number of factors. It's not a wild guess. Inevitably, you don't know. There's no scientific way of establishing what the precise numbers
so what's it based
are going
on, that
to be.
50,000? For
example, those who've already come over the last 5 years, comparing income levels between Romania, Bulgaria and the United Kingdom.
Are they at 50,000? Have they been like that for the last few years then, before the transition?
No, they haven't. They've been something like 30,000, but that's at a time when in theory there were constraints on those coming here. Once there aren't any, and bear in mind, no one said, we certainly haven't said, that everyone was waiting on the border to come here on the 31st of December.
Wasn't that the rhetoric that was surrounding some of what was said?
It wasn't what we were saying. Some of the tabloids may have been saying that. What we said was that over 5 years, on average, there would be between 30 and 70,000 a year coming here. In other words, a central figure of 50,000. We stick by that. I firmly stick by that.
You do? You don't think that that will be disproven, bearing in mind we haven't really seen those numbers coming to the airport?
Exactly the same thing was said when in 2004 the other Eastern Europeans came in and everyone said, oh, Migration Watch are wrong. Look, there's only going to be a few thousand coming in, between 5 and 13,000. In the end, it was a lot more than that. We believe that's going to happen again on this time round.
I mean, Dianne, according to a poll conducted by YouGov, the majority, 57%, think immigration has been bad for the British economy. Well, why do they think that?
Because historically, whenever you have an economic downturn, whether it's this country or Germany between the First and Second World War, and people are hurting, they look for scapegoats, and scapegoats are always immigrants or the other. I mean, it's a historical political phenomenon. The fact is, the same polling company, if you ask people how many immigrants are in the country, they wildly overestimate. The problem with immigration, there are two things about it which make it difficult just to bandy figures. One is immigration has always been a euphemism in the British political narrative for race or the other. And the other thing is that when people talk about immigrants, they don't just mean immigrants in a technical sense, they mean people that might be refugees or asylum seekers. They might see my son on the street and say, that's one of those immigrants who want. Few of them. My son is a third-generation British national.
Right. Do you think people haven't become more sophisticated, that actually their views on immigration have been particularly influenced by what happened when many Polish people, quite legitimately, came to this country, you know, during the 2000s?
If you read about the history of immigration to this country, what they say about Eastern Europeans now is almost exactly the same as what they said about the Irish in the 19th century. When it comes to immigration, the narrative is always the same.
Right. Do you agree that it's race and the other? It's a euphemism for something...
I disagree very strongly with Dianne on that. It's nothing to do with race. One thing that has changed hugely in my time in this country, and I'm a first-generation immigrant, is that people no longer look at people like Dianne and me and say, there's a foreigner. That doesn't happen anymore, and you only have to look at our football, cricket and every other sporting team to know that now this is about the volume and the speed with which it's happening, and that is not in interests of anyone, including those who are already here.
Maybe that's true in London, but my own party's done polling and spoken to people outside of London, and when you ask them what they mean by immigrants, they mean Muslims, they mean people who go to the mosque. It's a very emotive subject. That's why you're good to try and tease out the facts, but immigration is not now, and whether you're talking about the Jews in the 20th century or the Irish in the 19th century, it's never been something about facts.
Why did Labour feel it had to apologise then?
I don't know. I think all this endless apologising has really just reinforced the position of Mehmet and UKIP and the rest of them. We did indeed get the figure wrong on the polls, but the idea...
Wildly wrong.
Yeah, first to admit it. But the idea we had no border controls is nonsense.
Did too many people come over?
I mean, come to my office, I've got filing cabinets full of cases of people under a Labour government who waited years and years to bring their husbands, their wives, their children. The idea that we had open borders, it was the Labour administration. I didn't agree with it. It's the Labour administration which took away money from immigrants and gave them vouchers instead. We didn't have an open door. The figures about the polls were wrong, but there was no open door. That's a myth.
What do you say to that?
Well, the things did happen which made it considerably easier for people to come here. For example, they introduced something called the points-based system. And in the first year alone, the Public Accounts Committee, the National Audit Office, said that something like 50,000 people who gained entry as students actually came here to work.
Well, see,
Mehmet was a much
Mehmet sees
laxer.
it differently from me because he spent a long time in West Africa as an immigration officer or whatever it was. So you saw the people trying to come in. What I see is the people that don't get in. Now I can assure you there was no such thing as open borders under a Labour government.
Should we be encouraging more immigration? As one of the recent studies said that actually if we want growth to increase the way parties seem to want it to, that actually we need more migrants.
Well, the thing about migration, it's not about saying we want more, we want less. In the EU, you've got free movement, and it's really underlying genuine migration are economic trends.
Right. I mean, looking, though, at the advantages or disadvantages to certain groups of people in the economy. I mean, the engineering tycoon Sir James Dyson has launched a scathing attack on the government's immigration policy, accusing ministers of turning away bright foreign engineers the UK desperately needs. And he's writing in the FT saying his own firm would be forced to leave the UK unless the visa regime for foreign engineers was relaxed.
That's just a nonsense, frankly.
Which is the nonsense?
If you look at the numbers actually coming here to study at university, they went up last year despite the immigration policies of the country, and they went up the year before. Apart from that, there is an opportunity. Dyson can bring in as many people as he likes so long as he pays them enough, and we should be training our own people anyway. We can't simply turn to cheap labour, turn to the cheaper option and bring people in simply because they're cheaper.
Well, and isn't that the point, Dianne, that actually it's people, low-paid people in this country who are the ones who have suffered, so anecdotally it says, more than other parts of the population because up until now they can have been undercut, and these are the sorts of people that Labour is supposed to be sticking up for.
This is the oldest story in the book. The Irish were supposed to have driven down wages in the 19th century. The point is that people
Does it not matter, that?
No. People talk about this as if Eastern Europeans are coming here and paying themselves low wages, as if employers are innocent bystanders. We need to enforce the minimum wage. We need to reinforce the Gangmasters Act. We certainly need to bear down on exploitation. And actually, we need to look at trade union rights and freedoms. Of course, we need to drive out bad employers, but we shouldn't stigmatise migrants.
Right. I mean, if you want to reduce immigration, let's say to less than 40,000 a year, you'd have to leave the EU, wouldn't you?
First of all, just on that point, I'd hate to give the impression that I was trying to stigmatise migrants. I don't do that. When we talk about the number of people coming into this country, we're still 500,000, 500,000 people a year are coming in. That's simply a case of bringing that number down a bit, not stopping it or putting up the borders.